After the last few days, what we've seen is a load of protesters from an organisation called Insulate Britain, and they've taken it upon themselves to blockade the traffic, but not on the bridges of London, not on the roads of Newcastle, but on the M25, one of the busiest roads in Britain.
Annoying people, stopping them being able to get to work, creating congestion and pollution is the most moronic, counterproductive way of doing so.
We're facing an extraordinary crisis. It has got to the stage where only protests that disrupt the public, unfortunately, will actually bring up attention to the media and to the government.
Are they doing the right thing? This is Talk Radio TV's Political Punch-Up. Welcome to this week's edition of the Political Punch-Up. I'm Mike Graham, and unusually, I don't have an opinion this week because we are instead going to seek the opinion of two people who are diametrically opposed on this week's issue. And this week's issue is this: climate change. It's not just about whether climate is changing. It's not just about whether people are protesting in the right way. The question today for our debate is this: are climate change protesters barking up the wrong tree and upsetting all the wrong people so that nothing is actually going to happen? I'm delighted to say today we're joined by Donnachadh McCarthy, who is the climate change correspondent for The Independent, and Cristo Foufas, talk radio professional, a broadcaster extraordinaire, a man that can do everything from soup to nuts. And what I can say to you, Cristo, is you'll be glad to know I'm going to come to you first. You have a minute to make your case about climate change protesters.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll start by saying that these people seem to want to do everything they can to strip away public support for their cause. I do not for one second think it's a bad idea that we consider climate change. I'm not a climate change denier. There should be measures in place to have us using our cars less. There should be measures in place to have us insulating our homes. Annoying people, stopping them being able to get to work, creating congestion and pollution by closing motorways and causing bridges and trains to be unable to be used is the most moronic, counterproductive way of doing so, and all it does is annoy the public. Why aren't you campaigning as climate change protesters for the government to do more without inconveniencing people? Why aren't you protesting at the Chinese embassy? Why aren't you acknowledging the fact that actually incentivizing people and making their lives easier to do the right thing around climate change is the way forward, rather than campaigning to penalize, tax and physically inconveniencing people by the way you go about trying to make these changes? Do you think a hard-working plumber or a mum picking up her kids or a dad needing to get home from work or a dad picking up their children is going to be in any way overly enamoured by the climate changes that you're asking for by stopping them being able to get home? This is just virtue signalling, publicity-seeking claptrap, and all you're doing is trying to make a name for yourselves and annoy people rather than actually try and solicit change. And
well, you'll
finally,
be delighted to know to yourself, I've let you over the minute there, so I'm going to have to do the same for Donnachadh because we're going to be very fair here at the Political Punch-Up. Donnachadh, I'm going to ask you to speak for a minute, but I'll give you the extra time in order to not be accused of being in any way biased, because, of course, as you well know, I'm very neutral on this subject. Donnachadh, give us your views.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and thanks for the opportunity. We're facing an extraordinary crisis. The IPCC report just this summer said that we're now facing extreme weather events now across the planet. Temperature broke records by 5 degrees in Canada, 50 degrees centigrade in Canada. Floods in Germany, floods in China, entire year's rainfall in 3 days. And what is our UK government doing? It's cutting taxes on fuel duties. It's expanding roads, expanding airports. It's expanding the oil fields, coal and gas fields. And for years, climate protesters called on the government to take action. We marched, we signed petitions, we contacted MPs, and this is what's happened. And sadly to say, it has got to the stage where only protests that disrupt the public, unfortunately, will actually bring up attention to the media and to the government to bring this threat to Britain, this existential threat to Britain, to the public attention to get the government to change. If we don't, Britain faces a deadly future for working class people, for the entire country. For example, wheat prices, because of the fires in Canada, is up 50% this year. What will wheat prices be in 2050, when actually the Chatham House predicts food production worldwide would be down 30%. This is an existential crisis, and the protesters are correct to do peaceful, direct action.
But I'd have to say, and I'm going to ask you my first question, Donnachadh, that isn't it the case that no matter what, and scientists have said this in recent weeks, no matter what the West does, no matter specifically what Britain does, if we changed our behaviours and stopped driving everywhere, stopped taking trains, stopped using fossil fuels, stopped flying anywhere, it would take a minimum of 10 to 20 years before that had any effect whatsoever on food production, on the prices of things, on the shortages of things. You know, gas production has gone up, but so has the price of gas. And so the effect of people sitting down on the M25 is surely, as Cristo says, simply just something that looks good and will achieve nothing.
Well, the issue that these protesters have raised is insulation. Home heating is one of the largest sources of carbon emissions in the United Kingdom. 28,000 people die every year in excess deaths in the United Kingdom. Something that doesn't happen in other Northern European
Can you prove that?
The excess deaths, according to the NHS.
Excess deaths as a reason for excess deaths from what cause?
Well, the excess deaths occur in winter in the United Kingdom. They don't occur in other countries such as Northern Europe that are well insulated. And so,
are you sure about that, though? You see, this is the trouble. People come out with these statistics, and I'm not certain that you are not just making them up.
Well, all I can tell you is that you can look up the government. This is a government statement that I looked up and checked the actual figures. 28,000 deaths, excess deaths happen in Britain every year. 7 million people, according to the government, live in fuel poverty. That means they have to make a choice between food or heating their home. If we insulate their homes, those bills can come down by a third. So we start winning straight away by insulating poor people's homes. We cut the debts, we cut the bills. People are able to eat food rather than spending money heating their homes, and we tackle climate change. It's a win-win, surely, Mike.
Well, let's ask Cristo, because he's the man arguing with you. It's not me. Cristo, do you believe this figure of 38,000 excess deaths? What are they dying from?
I just love this argument that what we're going to do is we're going to stop poor people getting to work. But don't worry, it's for your own good, because in 20 years' time, you won't die from poor insulation. I mean, what a load of rubbish. If you want to help poorer people, firstly, stop hindering them being able to get to work, many of whom may be on insecure contracts, will be paid by the hour, and you are hindering them being able to earn money. You're talking about fuel and food poverty. What about the fuel and food poverty for someone who can't pay their bills because you've blocked the M25? It's the most moronic, counterproductive measure I've ever heard of in my life. And no one is arguing that insulating homes would be a good thing. What I find abhorrent about the whole climate change argument is that every single argument is always about hindering freedoms, taxing people, and finally, how on earth would we pay for the measures that you want to bring in? If you want people to insulate their homes, then fine. You will have to come up with a way by pressuring the government, perhaps standing as MPs, which you've tried, by the way. The Green Party has never had more than one MP, I don't think, elected, maybe two at one point. But politically, no one is really interested in this. But the way to do it is to facilitate.
That's not true.
Well, let me interrupt you, Cristo, for a moment. Let me ask you this, Donnachadh. People say, and you're one of them, that we do this in order to raise awareness. We must raise awareness about climate change. We're having in Scotland in November a climate change conference, an international conference. China may or may not attend. India may or may not attend. The government has already said that they've got a green agenda. They want everybody to have different ways of heating their homes in the next 20 years. They've already told us that diesel cars will not be sold in this country in 2030. So it's entirely wrong to say that the government isn't paying attention. And I think it's also wrong to say that nobody is aware of climate change. And the question really now, I suppose, that I want to put to you is Cristo right that the methods that these people are using, particularly Insulate Britain, which is frankly the worst name of any group I think I've ever heard. I thought it was a company that insulated people's homes. You know, are they not doing it the wrong way round?
Well, name any other approach that will work. I think it's terrible that they have
Well, this one doesn't work.
Well, like be frank with you, I would ask you come up with something else that has more power, that it will get actually the media talking about. For the first time in my lifetime, the major media are talking about the fact that we're not insulating our homes. The British government, you say, are right. They're making all these sorts of claims and statements, and there's a big conference in November. But the facts are they cut the Green Homes Grant, they cut the Green Deal Grant, they cut the loft and cavity wall programme, and they cut billions of the budget for social housing programme. I did not mention tax once today, Cristo. I actually talked about the failure of the government to invest. One thing that both of us, or maybe all three of us, I don't know, may agree on, is £116 billion that have been spent on a train that will cost huge amounts of carbon and huge amounts of inconvenience for people right across the country, HS2. That will not save carbon.
But trains are meant to be green, Donnachadh, aren't they? You'd rather I was on a train than driving my Range Rover, wouldn't you?
No, let's deal with one point at a time, because I've got two of you debating.
No, I'm in the middle here. I'm not in any way biased. I'm saying to you, the trains are supposed to be the green form of energy, aren't they?
Well, I think both of you are throwing points, but I'm happy to deal with that. You are correct, trains are greener, but building a new high-speed rail won't save a ton of carbon for 120 years. We can't afford to wait that much time. And imagine if that money was spent investing in poor people's homes to cut their bills. That'd be a win-win. No increase in taxes, we save lives, we cut carbon, and poor people have less money, have to spend less on their bills, and they can then afford to eat. It's a win-win.
Well, the thing is, though, this is what I'm thinking. We're going to come to the end of this, so you're going to make your final statements. Cristo, I would say that Donnachadh makes all the points that he makes, and he certainly believes them, and that's fine. He has some statistics which may or may not be back-upable. The problem is, though, the question here is not about whether the government should be doing more or whether people should be doing more. It's about whether the protesters are doing it right. And I would put it to you, Cristo, that your case against them is quite strong.
Well, I thank you for saying that, but the reason that I say this is not because I have any pleasure in slagging off these people. Clearly, they're well-intentioned, but I just wonder what the objective is here. Donnachadh, you're talking about the fact we've all got to have our homes insulated. I don't know how much carbon that would save, but I would imagine an amazing train service that's going to stop people flying, stop people getting in their cars, and increase capacity massively. Bearing in mind now, if you want to get a train across the country, it's an absolute fortune, and you end up sitting on the floor outside the loo, if you're lucky. I would have thought that you would be jumping for joy at that sort of thing. So you don't want the carbon saved by the train journeys being used instead of flights or cars, but you do want the carbon saved by insulation. My overriding point is that this needs to be about facilitating and incentivizing people to make their lives easier by making the change, not by penalizing them, either by protesting or by policies that are going to see them paying more or their lives inconvenienced. That is, I think, the way in order to tackle this problem, rather than what we're seeing at the moment. Because, frankly, this kind of action makes me want to go out, buy the biggest gas-guzzling 4x4, because I'm going to be stuck in traffic due to protesters or stuck in traffic due to unused cycle lanes. I would rather do so in comfort, thanks.
Donnachadh, your final thoughts. I want you to answer the question. I know you've said to me, what else can they do? There must be surely amongst the climate change maniacs some form of attack that could be better than this, because what is very sure and what is very certain is that when Extinction Rebellion hold up bridges, when the Insulate Britain mob stop people from going about their business, they are not winning hearts and minds. And that's the question that I'm asking you as to whether they're doing.
Well, 2 points. Cristo said that we want to make it easier for people. Well, that's exactly what the Insulating Britain is saying, is make it easier for people to have lower bills and cut carbon. It's not about raising taxes. Secondly, about your point, historically, you talked about climate maniacs. Well, you're right. The climate maniacs in Shell, BP, Barclays and HSBC are investing $5 trillion in new fossil fuels to trash our future. What are we going to do about those maniacs? Unless there's protesters, bring it to the attention of the public and the media.
Nobody's listening. Nobody's listening.
Isn't disaster. Well, actually, they are. The vast majority, 70% of the public.
Well, what are you complaining about then?
70% of the public believes that the government should be doing more, and the government
Rubbish.
is refusing to do what's needed. It's a survey.
I don't believe those statistics. The point is that you can't have it both ways, Donnachadh. You can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand the government's not doing enough, but yet the people want them to do more. But at the same time, you're telling me that these people who are disrupting everybody's life need something else done. It doesn't make any sense.
Mike, you can't have it either way as well, both ways
I can,
as well.
actually, because that's what I do.
Okay, well, what you're trying to have it is that you're trying to be an impartial judge and argue with me.
Famous for it.
So let's make our minds up which you are. But I would make the point I would to finish on is that we have a problem with Shell, BP, Barclays and HSBC.
Why are you singling out Barclays? Why would you not name every other single banking group? The point is that, why don't you just admit, Donnachadh, that you are a Marxist who wants to destroy capitalism, and then at least we can all get along with the truth.
I'm a former Liberal chair of the Liberal Democrat Party. If describing a Democrat, small l, small d, is a Marxist, then the description has radically changed.
Well, Layla Moran is. She's really high up in the party. But listen, the time has now come for me to make my verdict known. And I think I have to say that much against my better judgment, I'm going to side with Cristo here because, Donnachadh, unfortunately, you've been all over the place, right? What you've done is you've given us a load of statistics. You've given us the names of a load of multinational companies that are not doing the right thing. You've told us that, the climate change protesters are doing the right thing. But the question, which is whether or not they're going about it the right way, or are they barking up the wrong tree, I think very clearly Cristo has won that because he can say with an absolute degree of truth that people are not buying it. When you've got motorists dragging these protesters off the road and chucking them into a ditch, you know that they're not doing the right thing. Do you know they actually stopped a guy who's an insulator, who runs an insulating business, from getting to a house to insulate it? So clearly they're barking up the wrong tree, aren't they?
Well, actually, what I thought was very interesting, I saw on the TV people introducing a number of the drivers, and they're saying they were really inconvenienced, they're fed up with it, but they said, what else can they do to get the government to sit up and take action to save people's lives?
Yeah, well, they're not saving any lives. In fact, if anything, they're putting lives in danger. Listen, I thank you both for joining in the political punch-up. It was actually a lot more civilised than I thought it was going to be, disappointingly. I'd like you next time to bring your A games, otherwise you might not be invited back. But this climate will continue to change. The political climate will also continue to change. I am in the hot seat here, and as my verdict is, Cristo wins. It's Cristo 1, it's Donnachadh 0. We may well have a rematch here on Talk Radio TV. This has been the Political Punch-Up. Well, that was great, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that. If you did, there's lots more like it. Have a look over here.